Hello OTCers and welcome to our Monday and welcome to Los Angeles, where Paris Saint-Germain have just beaten Atletico Madrid handily in their first game of the Club World Cup. And I think straight away we have to say that this PSG could become one of the greatest teams, if not the greatest team of their generation. They are outstanding, and what really impressed me about them today is that, okay, they'd just come off the back of the Champions League final, which was outstanding, and it could have easily been after the Lord Mayor's show. No real days off. I was reading the other day that Desiree Doué had 1 day off since the Champions League final to celebrate his 20th birthday, which was wedged between that party at the Parc des Princes and him going off on international duty for France before he came to LA with PSG. And the appetite that they have is absolutely relentless. Now, Marquinhos spoke to us about this afterwards when he came out of the dressing room. He told us all how, look, they were full of confidence because despite the fact it was difficult conditions today, and oh my God, 32 degrees at midday, absolutely unbelievable. People were sweltering in here, no shade for the spectators here in the Rose Bowl either, and that definitely affected the way the game went. Now, PSG never pressed as relentlessly as they did in that final against Inter, but you know what, that's the thing that impressed me the most about them today, that they used the brains as well as their obvious talent, that they knew when to regulate the game, they knew when to lay off the press and actually just used possession as containment. Now, I guess that's where Luis Enrique comes in, because he's someone who mixes up the formula of what we think Spanish football should be, and he certainly did that when he was at Barcelona going back a decade. But Marquinhos spoke as well afterwards about how every little detail is taken care of. He's got such incredible attention to detail, the coach. That's what he told us. And I think you can really see that, because when I'm talking about possession as containment, I think the best players for that really, Vitinha, who obviously ended up with man of the match, scored the second goal, did a brilliant job in that midfield in just, stemming the flow. He did a similar job when he came on as substitute for Portugal in the semi-final of the Nations League against Germany, and that's why he's so incredibly valuable. But William Pacho did it very well as well, and so did Marquinhos himself to a lesser extent in the first half. In the second half, obviously, it opened up a little bit more when they had facing a 10-man opposition, when Clement Lenglet was sent off, and Lenglet, none of the Atletico players could figure out why he was actually sent off. I think maybe unaware of the rule that only the captain is allowed to speak to the referee, something that might come up again, I think, in this first round in particular of Club World Cup matches. But I think PSG really had their plan today, because I think they knew that this would be the toughest game of the group, not just because it's Atletico Madrid and we know they always provide hard opposition, and we know as well that when they played PSG earlier in the season in the Champions League, they beat them despite being dominated the entire game in Paris, despite Warren Zaïre-Emery giving PSG the lead. They knew how to come back, they knew how to tough it out in that game, and they won it right at the end with that goal by Angel Correa, which Gigi Donnarumma could have done a bit better with. Not something we've said so much in the last couple of months. But I think that the fact that they knew that the conditions were going to be hellish, as Marcos Llorente told us in the mix zone afterwards, and they were able to deal with that. As Marquinhos also said to us, it's something that was very hard to deal with, but it was harder for them. He said it was harder for Atletico because it's much harder chasing after the ball. And it's one of the immutable laws of football, but it's absolutely true. And so really, I think they were able to lean into their strength, which is circulating the ball, which is dominating through possession. And of course, their nature is to be aggressive, but they were able to hold off that a little bit. Now, of course, the aggression was still there, we saw that through Kvaratskhelia, who is insatiable. And you think actually that mid-season injury that he had maybe has done him a little bit of good, because he's not started as many games as some of his colleagues, and it looks like he's still got absolutely tons in the tank. Atletico were a bit annoyed that a couple of fouls, as they saw it by him, were let go, and they were punished for others. But really, I think that's a footnote to what happened today. And I think the fact that they showed their intention early on as well, when they were taking kickoff, and they just smashed it up the pitch into the corner, into touch, because they thought, okay, let's give them the press from minute one, from less than minute one. And I think because the kickoff, they didn't quite take it right, and they had to go back and take it again. Atletico were a bit forewarned. Maybe Atletico had done their homework on them anyway, but they went across and took the throw in unbelievably quickly. So it wasn't them being hemmed in and being completely stuck, and they were able to get out of that. But they weren't able to deal with the rest of the game as well. Now, what about Atletico? I mean, I think this is one of those days, as one journalist said to me, when you step off the team coach, you feel the heat absolutely hit you in the face. And if there's even the slightest bit in your mind of, yeah, I don't really fancy this, then that's you stuck, because you're playing, like, as I said, a team that are not only the best in Europe at the moment, but might be for years and years to come, the way they're going. Because Atletico really carried a sense of hopelessness with them. And when they did get the ball, on the rare occasions that they did get the ball, they were so spent, they just had no clarity, and they weren't able to make the most of their possessions. We saw a lot of counter-attacks, particularly in the first half, where they didn't pick the right option. And as anyone who's ever played football knows, that's something that happens a lot when you're chasing the ball, that when you've got the ball, you're not quite able to have that clarity on it. So why am I saying that PSG, in conclusion, are the team that could dominate for years and years to come? Look, I'm sure Barcelona will have something to say about that, well, financial issues notwithstanding, but the adaptability of PSG is what's impressed me so much today. So everything they could have used as an excuse, the heat, the kickoff time, the fact that Ousmane Dembélé, who was walking quite freely behind the scenes, by the way, so I expect him to come back a little bit sooner than has been previously advertised, but he wasn't fit, and we knew he wasn't going to be fit to start this tournament. There'd even been doubt that he would be able to play any part in it at some point. So no Dembélé, no Bradley Barcola either, who had a minor knee injury, and he's been back in training, but they didn't really want to risk him today as well. And then you think, really, probably the biggest concern for PSG going into this summer is, how do they improve on what they've got? Is that feeling that they're as good as it gets already? But this is a young team that's still developing, that's learning every day with Luis Enrique. And when a few things change and they have to make a few little adjustments, they just manage to deal with it, which is pretty fantastic. Thanks so much, as always, for joining us on OTC. Remember, we're here on YouTube every Monday, and we'll be doing lots of bits on this, the Club World Cup. There's loads else going on. The little things on the bench where you have them marked as the Atletico bench and the PSG bench, they've changed them over already. Monterrey are already on it. We'll be covering Monterrey versus Inter later this week on some of our other channels, on the Insta, of course, and on the podcast, On the Continent, out every Thursday. Me, Dot Nadabayo, and guests. Easy to find on your podcatcher of choice. And every Friday we've got Ask OTC, where we go again, and with our brilliant guests as well, we answer your questions about European football. Please leave them below the line or get at us on the socials, OTC Pod. We will see you again next Monday, but don't forget, we've got on the podcast feed a really great 3-parter about my time in Los Angeles at the Club World Cup coming up as well, so keep an eye out for that.